So today we're going to talk about Star Wars Battlefront. No, not that one. Not that one. I've never touched that one, and quite frankly have no desire to do so. No, I want to talk about the old one. From 2004. From LucasArts and Pandemic, and released for PCs and PlayStation 2s, and the version we're looking at today, Xbox. It's been years since I last touched this game. It's one of the first games I had for the Xbox when I got the system back in about Christmas 2004-ish. That was quite a bit of fun. One of the few video games I got to play with my brother back in the day because you had the multiple accounts and you could play local multiplayer via split screen. The original Star Wars Battlefront, the old one I should remind you, was a fun game. But then Star Wars Battlefront 2, also the old one, came along a year or so later and improved everything this game did across the board and then some. At which point I never really looked back to Battlefront the first. It was only up until about, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago, when I decided to give the original Star Wars Battlefront another run, with the intention of documenting the whole experience as a video review of sorts. Well, better late than never, I suppose, so here we are, I guess. Released in 2004 for Xbox and also for PlayStation 2 and PC, Star Wars Battlefront is one of those games where you play a grunt soldier for either the Rebel Alliance, the Galactic Empire, the Republic, or the droids, and your overall objective is to defeat the opposing force, done by either wiping out all their troops or taking control of all the command posts on a map. Each faction has 5 soldier types that look different but otherwise serve the same function for the most part. So you've got your standard rifle-toting grunt, your snipers, your rocket-launching troopers, your pilot that serves mostly as a mechanic in this game to repair stuff, and a specialized soldier type unique to each faction, such as the droidicas of the droids and the Empire's dark troopers, the Rebels' Wookiees, and the clone troopers' jet troopers. That's all I got. In addition to your various troop types, you can also man a number of vehicles lying around the field depending on who you're working for, whether it be a speeder or a walker or a starfighter parked around the area, or even some indigenous life form like a tauntaun or something like that. So there's quite a bit to do here in order to achieve your ultimate goal in any of these encounters: total domination and elimination of the enemy, whether it be again through exhausting their reinforcements or capturing any and all command posts on the current map. There are 3 modes of play in Star Wars Battlefront: historical campaigns, galactic conquest, and instant action. Historical campaigns lets you play out either the Clone Wars or the Galactic Civil War, and all the important bits that took place in each. While the Clone War campaign only tells part of the story, since Battlefront was released a year before Revenge of the Sith was released, the Galactic Civil War pretty much tells the whole story of the original trilogy, and both campaigns let you relive both sides of the conflicts depending on the mission. Galactic Conquest offers a different type of campaign, where you and your rival faction, either Rebellion or Empire or Clones versus Droids, compete for control of the galaxy, usually done by picking planets and defeating the enemy on each encounter. Taking control of a planet rewards you with an additional benefit you could take into your next battle, whether it be additional reinforcements, sabotage of enemy equipment, or even having a Jedi hero in your ranks to help out. When you've won 4 battles, you'll get a peculiar bonus, either to conquer a planet without much of a battle, or in the case of the Empire, or you can use the Death Star to blow up a planet and wipe it off the map. Once you've taken control of all the planets, you'll invade your rival's home base for the supposed final battle, or vice versa, and if you conquer the rival's home planet, you win Galactic Conquest. And then there's instant action, where you can pick any map and play them in any order you wish. Any and all of these modes can not only be played as a solo experience, no pun intended, but also in a multiplayer capacity. While Xbox Live on OG Xbox is a thing of the past, you can still partake in 2-player split-screen action, which is always fun and far more satisfying. Because whenever somebody does something stupid, they are always within arm's reach to, well, use your imagination. Battlefront offers you 10 planets to wage war on. Some planets have 2 maps or battlefronts, while 4 planets have only 1. With the exception of the 4 single-map planets, you can play any battlefield during the Clone War or Galactic Civil War eras. Those other planets are era-specific, so don't expect droids and clones to duke it out in Hoth or Imperials fighting rebels on Geonosis. The game wouldn't let you do that, not even the sequel. Which is a shame, but not a deal-breaker. After all, stormtroopers can storm Naboo and kill all the Gungans. And that makes me very, very happy. Star Wars Battlefront sports tight responsive controls that shouldn't take long to learn how everything works and which buttons does what. I got this game without a manual back in the day, and it took me a quick game or two to get the hang of the controls and how they work. Once that learning curve's out of the way, it felt natural, it felt responsive, everything works well enough that it's not much of a hassle to play with. And if you have troubles with the way things work, the game provides tutorial videos that teaches the basics of the gameplay, which is nice. There's also button configurations you could check out. And once you figure out how stuff works, it's a stupidly fun game to play. Probably best played in a multiplayer environment, obviously, but even in a single player, it's a pretty enjoyable game. The actual action might not be the deepest, but it does support a variety of strategies, whether it be guns blazing against the storm, sniping targets from a distance, holding the fort, or doing all the work while everyone else just pelts each other with laser beams. Sometimes you just want a game that goes bang bang without much fuss, and that's what Battlefront provides. Is it a perfect game? No, of course not. There are no space battles, the Jedi heroes that pop up aren't playable in any way, shape, or form. The scope of the battles are limited, don't expect stormtroopers against clone troopers in this here game. Sometimes the camera tends to be a bit finicky during the third-person bits, couple minor issues here and there, but for the most part, it's a pretty solid package. And it's a really nice looking game too, perhaps not something that holds up to 2019 standards or anything like that, but for a game that came out in 2004, Star Wars Battlefront has some splendid looking visuals and set pieces. The character models are pretty well crafted and animated, almost looking like what they're supposed to, unless they're rebels, in which case the faces look a bit meh. The battlefronts are also pretty well rendered, lens flare and all. They look like the places they're supposed to replicate. The game gives you the option of either first person or third person perspective. I generally stick with the latter, but both work just as well. Game runs fairly smoothly, although there are some noticeable frame drops that happen at times when the action gets a little too intense, but nothing too crippling, I think. And for the intermissions in the historical campaigns as well as the Galactic Conquest, Battlefront just plays some clips from the movies and they look fine in terms of quality. Discussing sound in a Star Wars game in a generation involving disc-based media is entirely pointless. Every Star Wars game is always going to feature samples from the classic John Williams composed soundtrack, and is always going to feature those classic sound effects played in pristine quality. Star Wars Battlefront is no different. No point in bringing these aspects of the audio. It's always top-notch, it's always splendid, and it always runs the risk of getting nailed by Content ID. Voiceovers aren't too bad, just quick sound bites here and there. They may get repetitive after a while, but on a whole, not bad at all, really. Star Wars Battlefront could very well be that almost perfect Star Wars experience for a novice player because it's fairly easy to get into, it does a lot of things and does them well. It's fun to play, the overall presentation is pretty top-notch. There's nothing in the gameplay that feels broken or unpolished. It's a pretty solid package whose only real downside is that it has a sequel that improved on the package with more stuff and variety. And when that's the only real gripe to be had with a game, then it's a good sign of quality. With all that said, is the original Star Wars Battlefront worth giving a shot today? Honestly, I don't see why not. The sequel might have more stuff, but this first game holds up pretty damn well, all things considered. If you've got an old machine and you could find a copy laying around for fairly cheap, go for it. Consider it an appetizer of sorts for the main course that would come along much later on, and that is another story to be told at a later time.